All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started just in the interest of time. And if others join, I think it'll be easy for them to catch right up. We are recording in case you did not hear that or don't see a permission or acknowledgement at the top of the screen because there were folks that had lots of things going on this week. So we're glad to be able to do that. And we're super excited to see, so many of you here joining this live session. You are the first group to hear about the new standards and the plan supports. And I just, as we're setting sort of the stage for this exciting new body of professional standards and competencies, I just want you to take a moment. I'm not going to ask you to share this in the chat. I just want you to write it down or think about it. I want you to think about what it is that you think would be critical. One thing, either in your earlier self as you entered this field, or maybe you're supporting early childhood educators in your work right now. What is something you think is critical in terms of a body of knowledge or content that you think that early childhood educators should know? Or maybe a skill that you think is imperative that they're able to demonstrate in their work with young children and families birth to 8. So just jot that down, be thinking about it as we're sort of going through this really exciting information and introducing you to the new standards. So you can do next slide, Kelsey. All right, so I'm going to quickly introduce you to those that will be sharing today and at the same time share what our agenda looks like for today. So I'm Robin Zeider. I am the State Administrative Manager for the Professional Development and Outreach Unit at MyLeap. And I will be taking us through sort of the first couple of slides that pertain to introduction and background, as well as the agenda. And then Kelsey Laird, and Kelsey, I don't know if you want to wave. I know you're on camera. She is the Director of Professional Programs at Michigan AEYC, and she will be sort of sharing that role that Michigan AEYC is playing. This has been a very collaborative project and will continue to be so. And then the bulk of this content is going to be delivered by Michelle Daniels, who is a program coordinator at Michigan AEYC. And she too, feel free to wave Michelle so they know who you are. And then Emily, the Director of Operations at my registry, is going to talk about those impacts that are related to my registry. So course approval and reports and some of the sort of nuts and bolts that changing the body of standards does or impacts the impacts that it has on the registry. So that's our plan for our time together today. Next slide, please. So as we think about kind of what we're here to talk about today, just want to sort of set the groundwork. Most of you are likely really familiar with the Michigan Core Knowledge and Core Competencies for the Early Care and Education Workforce. Those were developed in 2013, and then I think passed by the State Board of Ed at the time in 2014. And since that time, for that body of standards, most, if not all of the things that they were aligned to have, and someone might need to check their mute. So most of the things that the CKCCs were aligned to had gone through a series of revisions and updates in and of themselves. And so we knew that we had to sort of look at that body of work and determine what do we do, what needs to be revised, what do we want to do as a state around this workforce and the professional standards and competencies that are important for them. So at the same time, or shortly thereafter, the National Association for the Education of Young Children launched Power to the Profession. And that initiative included a strong set of standards and competencies for those in this profession, what they needed to know and be able to do in their work with young children and families. And so we engaged a work group and said, hey, we have this existing body, NACCE and Power to the Profession, part of the unifying framework, has an existing body of standards and competencies, why don't we consider taking a look at what our national organization felt was important? And so, as I said, this work is a collaboration between MyLeap, Michigan AUIC, my registry, and as I said, we started with a work group to really do that heavy review and updating. So we're quite excited about where we are. Let's go to the next slide. So why the standards were revised? As I mentioned, they needed to be, right? They were getting to be, 11 or 12 years old, and it was really time to invest and compare to those standards that they were aligned to, like Great Start to Quality, like NACCE professional preparation standards, like the Head Start standards. But we really also think about why this is so important in terms of having a common language, having a common set of standards, both nationally or that align to the national standards. Also thinking about that power to the profession and recognition. This is, again, this body of work is the set of things, standards and competencies, knowledge, content, disposition, all of the things that early childhood educators need to know and be able to do or demonstrate in their work. We also wanted a well-prepared workforce, by looking at how our higher ed folks prepare students in formalized higher ed content and professional development, having those align to a set of common standards really supports having a well-prepared workforce. Also, sort of a side note is I think we're hopeful that there'll be some possibility around increased transfer and articulation, since again, we're speaking a common language, we're aligning to a common set of standards. And then overall, this body of standards really allows us to continue to elevate the profession. Michigan is completely committed to a skilled, respected, and unified early childhood workforce. And I'll turn it over to you, Kelsey.
Thanks, Robin. All right, so I get to talk to you all about the role of Michigan AEYC in this whole process. And as Robin mentioned and clearly explained the role of NAEYC and how we sort of came to this position in Michigan under the adoption of the unifying framework, that it really made sense for Michigan to examine what we were already doing and align what we're already doing with the national framework. So these new standards and competencies are a direct result of that work, and they are all based foundationally on NAEYC's core standards. So we led a stakeholder group, like Robin mentioned, to develop and recommend the new standards for adoption in Michigan earlier in 2025. So we now that they've been fully adopted, Michigan AUIC is taking the role of making sure that educators have everything needed to use them in their practice. So we're going to be housing the standards, the resources, and all of the related trainings on using those standards in practice in our Michigan AEYC Knowledge Center. So that is directly from our website. It's our learning management system that will serve as a learning hub to allow its users to access the standards, to find clear explanations of each one, get trainings, and then also break down the competencies in levels so you can see the leveling with each competency and how that is used in practice. We're also going to be collecting feedback along the way. And this group, we're excited to start off that feedback collection piece with. So we're going to make sure that ongoing feedback is included in our reviewing processes of the standards to make sure that they're relevant, to practical and useful, and in response to what's happening currently in Michigan. So these are the 6 adopted NAEYC professional standards and competencies, and the 3 additional Michigan-specific standards, which the work group identified as essential standards that while could be potentially found in spaces in the NAEYC standards, really needed, we didn't feel that they were fully addressed and needed to be called out specifically for Michigan's early childhood workforce. So those three additional standards are um, around promoting children's health and wellness, one around promoting the well-being of early childhood educators themselves, and one around leading high-quality early childhood programs. So this approach allowed us to align to the national framework by adopting the NAEYC's 6 standards as they were, but then also ensuring that it's locally relevant here in Michigan with the addition of our 3 standards. And I will say that Michigan is not the first to adopt the NAEYC standards. Several other states, 2, 3 maybe. Robin, I'm gonna rely on you. 4. Okay, thank you. 4 states have already completed this work to adopt the standards, and I believe most, if not all, have modified or included their own state-specific standards as well. So we are certainly in alignment with others that are following this process and have been working closely with NAEYC through this process in the adoption here in Michigan. Now I get to turn it over to Michelle for the fun part, because she is going to guide you through each of these standards in the framework and give you a little peek at our LMS.
Thank you. So we're going to talk a little bit about the structure and framework of the new standards, as well as explaining the skill progression, and as Kelsey mentioned, taking a look at the website. So as you can see, the new standards are similar in structure to the CKCC. There are 9 standards, which represent the broad categories of practice. Each standard has 3 to 5 competencies, and these are the skills and knowledge that educators would need to be able to effectively teach children. Within each competency, there are 3 skill progression levels. And one thing that we have adopted with these new standards is some new common language. Early childhood educators are referred to as that, not teachers or professionals, but early childhood educators, which reflects that all of us play a role in educating the young children in Michigan. So let's take a deeper look at the skill progression levels. Next slide, please. So sometimes you'll hear this referred to as just leveling, but it is the knowledge and skill progression levels. ECE 1, 2, and 3 are the designations. ECE 1 represents the foundational level. These are teachers who are newer to the field. They're demonstrating a basic understanding of concepts and practices. They're following guidance from others, applying some of those foundational skills that they're learning, and kind of building awareness of what it means to be a professional in this field. We move on to ECE 2, which is considered the proficient level. These are your solid teachers. They have a solid understanding of child development. They're able to independently apply their knowledge and their skills. They collaborate with families and others, and they're able to reflect on their practice and adjust. So they're pretty independent at this point. ECE 3 is your advanced level. These are those who are leading, mentoring others. They're designing, evaluate, and improving systems. They're advocates for the field, and they're able to model reflective practice and support growth in others. So I would venture to say everyone on this call is probably in the ECE 3 level. These levels are not exclusive to classroom educators. They represent the whole range of our field, from the beginning of your career all the way to the end of your career. So this progression encompasses everyone. Next slide. So now we're going to get to the fun part. We're going to take a look at the website, and I'm going to have you stop sharing so I can share. And hopefully I don't kick myself out too many times. It's a frequent problem moving between pages. I kick myself out. All right, Kelsey, can you see the screen? Okay. So this is our landing page for the Knowledge Center. I just wanted to show you how to get to the site. And you'll see right down here towards the bottom, Michigan Professional Standards and Competencies. To get to the site, you're just going to click there. However, it's not live right now, so I'm going to switch over. When you click on that, there's a brief announcement that kind of explains what Robin just talked about, why the standards were revised, where they came from, and how they're going to support our field. And at the bottom, you can click to go to the actual site. You're not going to be able to see this. It's not going to be real clear because obviously the writing's very small. However, my goal is to give you a basic overview of how the site is laid out and what's there that's available for you. After this webinar, sometime this afternoon, this site will go live for you so that you can explore, you can see what's there, and you can provide feedback to help us improve and make sure that every support possible is there. So our options here, we have the first option is explore the new standards, and I'll go into here in just a moment. This is where the standards live. You'll get a further explanation. Introduction booklet. We are having a introduction booklet with the standards and competencies, as well as some plain language and examples of the standards and practice, and that will be available coming soon. Next, we have what can I expect during the transition, and this will give you all kinds of information on what you can expect in your current role. How can the standards enhance my role is an option to find out how you can use these standards in your everyday work. They're not just a set of standards to, sit in a document. They're actually a living, breathing framework that helps us. There's a training option that will give you a training on all 9 standards. There's an individual training for each one, as well as an introduction training. There's a section for documents and alignments, frequently asked questions, and feedback and support. And I will show you all of these now. So explore the standards is where you're going to get the majority of your information. When you click on this, you're going to see a box for each standard. So you're able to dig into each one individually. I'm going to go into standard 1. At the top, you'll see the standard written out, and then you'll see a box for each one of the competencies. Moving down, you'll see the training for standard 1. It's right here on the standard 1 page, so it's easily accessible. You can also access it from the main landing page. After the training, you will see resources specific to standard 1. These will continue to be updated, added to. If you know of a great resource, please let us know. I'm happy to put it on there. Going back up to the competencies, if you click on one of the competencies, so for example, 1A, a new page will come up that lists the competency and the 3 skill progression levels. So ECE 1, 2, as well as 3. Below that, you'll see examples of how that competency looks at each of the 3 different levels. Right, I'm going to go backwards now. Those are the standard pages. Next, we'll take a look at what to expect during the transition. This page, as well as the enhancement page, is broken down by role. So these are the 4 roles that are going to be impacted by the transition. And so we wanted you to know exactly what you could expect. So for example, I'll go to mentor specialists and coaches. It gives just specific information about what the transition will look like for you. Going backwards again. I'm going to move on to how can the standards enhance my role. Again, this is broken down by your role so that you can get information that's specific for you. When you click on any one of these, a new page will open up and it will give specific ways that you can enhance your role with the standards. I apologize if you hear some noise. They're mowing my lawn right outside my window. Bad timing. So here you can find just so many different ways that the standards can really support our work. All right, I'm going to move. And as you can see, there's a box for just about everyone I could think of. If there's a group that I missed, again, please let us know. All right, back to the main page. Training is self-explanatory. All of the trainings can be found here, as well as in the different standard pages. Moving on to documents and alignments. There's a whole host of supports here for you. First off, we have the standards and competencies with leveling. So that's a huge document with all of the leveling. We also have it without the leveling, with just the standards and competencies, as well as a list of the competencies only. There's also 2 documents that help you understand some standards better. Standards 4 and 5 are very similar as far as they both have to do with teaching. However, standard 4 is about how we teach. Standard 5 is about what we teach. And so there's a comparison of the 2 and what falls into each standard to make it a little clearer. Same thing with the comparison of standards 6 and 9. 6 is professionalism as an early childhood educator. 9 is promoting the well-being of early childhood educators, which part of that is included in 6. However, that is a high priority for us considering the burnout rate and just the amount of people leaving our field. And so it's really important that we understand the well-being of educators and how that impacts teaching. So that document will give you a breakdown of what each of those 2 standards entails. Moving down, there's some alignment documents. You'll find a CKCC to MiPSC alignment to help you see where the CKCCs fit into the new framework. Again, that teaching and learning, the teaching and learning section of the CKCC was not a direct transfer into the new standards. And so we created a document to help you see which of the teaching and learning competencies fit into each of the different standards. It got a little murky, so we have a document to help you see exactly where everything is cross-referenced. Then we have the alignment with the CDA. Moving down, there's a few tools and forms where you can see the actual standards being used. There's a job description that's completely aligned with the standards, an onboarding checklist, a evaluation tool, and an observation and feedback tool. All of these tools are completely aligned with the standards and show how these standards bring our work to fruition and help us to have high quality programs. So these are all of the documents. Next, we have frequently asked questions. And here's a few commonly asked questions. And we will continue to add to this. If we're noticing questions come up repeatedly, we'll add them here. So if you have a question, take a look here. The answer might be there. And then the last thing on our main menu is feedback and support. On this page, there's a couple of different options. The first option is the MiPSC feedback. This form will help you give specific feedback on the standards, on the website, documents, everything related to the standards. We want your feedback. This framework is for our entire field, and we want to know what you need. What other resources do you need? What would make the standards clearer? Is there something we've missed? Let us know. We really would like your feedback. This feedback will be compiled, and annually we will be reviewing the standards and all of the accompanying documents and resources and making sure that they reflect what you need at this time. So please provide feedback. There will be an opportunity at the end of this webinar to get started. So when you click on this, it goes to a form that you can fill out. If you have a My Registry specific question, we put a link here to go directly to the My Registry support page to help you get those questions answered quickly. Technical troubleshooting gives you some things to check out if you're having trouble with technology. I'll tell you right now, this site does not work with Internet Explorer. So it's better if you use Google Chrome or Safari, but you will have problems if you use Internet Explorer. But there's also some other troubleshooting tips down here that will help. However, if you've tried all the technical troubleshooting, you need some support, you can click on the last box to report a technical problem. This can be anything from trouble logging in, broken links, something's not downloading, anything you can put on this form. And we will get right back to you and make sure that we get it all cleared up for you. So that is a quick overview, very quick. But basically what I want you to know is that there's so much support available. We really want to make sure that these standards are used in everything we do. This is what defines our profession. And so any support that we can give, we're there. If there's anything we've missed, please let us know. And as I mentioned, I know this is a lot of information, very short period of time. And you're trying to see a tiny screen. But as I mentioned, it will go live later on, hopefully today, and you'll get a chance to explore. You have the feedback form. If there's any problems, fill it out. It'll come directly to me, and I'm happy to answer any questions or make changes. Let me stop sharing. And I am going to turn it over to Emily Finnerud to talk about my registry.
Awesome. Thank you.
Emily?
All right. So before I get into my spiel, I don't want to bury the lead. I just want to say I have a lot of good news as these changes relate to the My Registry system. So before I get into it, not a lot to worry about at all. So I'll go ahead and get started. So in June of this year, My Registry created a crosswalk between the current core knowledge and competency areas and how they align with the new Michigan professional standards and competencies. So just to kind of put it all out there, and we also included the CDA competency information on there as well. So it's all in one place and it kind of makes it really easy to see where things land. I will put a little link in the chat to our web page, the page on our site that has resource information and kind of talks a little bit about the change and how these changes impact my registry. And most of you, if not all of you, might have also gotten the tips for trainers that came out in July that had a lot of this information in it as well. So I just wanted to put a plug there while we were talking crosswalk. So that was kind of our initial step in this transition. On to number 2, the initial realignment. Oh, sorry, let me back up really quick. So using the crosswalk, there will be for the initial alignment, there's going to be a lot of back-end system realignment of all non-expired courses and scheduled events from the current CKCCs to the updated standards. And that initial realignment is going to happen like right before we go live. So all of the stuff that is currently existing and is scheduled at that time, all of that stuff will be taken care of for you. That transition is going to happen from the system side of things, so you don't need to do anything. Onto the launch. So we're projecting a current kind of like go live date to occur in the fall of this year, more specifically November. So mark your calendars for November. That is when we're planning on having this transition go live. So once that change is live, moving on to number 4, what my registry will be doing is executing kind of quality assurance measures to make sure that the courses have been transitioned properly and to kind of do any manual updates to courses that need to be adjusted, kind of like what Michelle was talking about. It isn't exactly a perfect one-to-one in some of those standard areas. And my registry is going to be doing a review to make sure that there is proper alignment and that the courses are where they need to be. So we're doing a lot of that work, and that is very intentional. Like I said, we want the focus to be on learning and getting to know the standards and not having to deal with changing things in the system. So that a lot of that will, if most of it will be just completely done for you. All right, we can go to the next slide. All right, so breaking it down into kind of those different audiences, starting with program teaching staff. So this is where the biggest change will be. And it's going to come in the realm of learning records. So program teaching staff will see an archived learning record that contains all the training information aligned to the current core knowledge and competency areas. And that's, what their current learning record looks like right now. That will kind of turn itself into an archived learning record. So those records will remain untouched when the changeover happens. And then, as you can imagine, any training that is taken moving forward will automatically be aligned to the new standards and will populate what will be their learning record, right? So these two reports kind of in tandem will contain all of their verified training that they have completed. And that was also for kind of ease, right? Anybody who has kind of interacted with the learning record knows that there's a lot of information on there. And when we were talking about, best way and maybe combining, it didn't feel like a very easy way to do it. So that's kind of how we moved forward. So those two reports, like I said, will contain all of that verified training information. But one thing to note, like that's really only in the reports area of kind of their realm. So regardless of if a training is categorized under the core knowledge and competency area or the new NACE standards, all the training will be visible on their My Registry profile, regardless of where it lands. So there's going to be no change to how somebody currently interacts with verified training on their profile after the transition occurs. And then the last thing that we kind of want to keep in mind when we're thinking about program teaching staff is the training calendar. So the training calendar, again, is going to automatically be updated. So if there's any staff searching for training, it's already going to be aligned to the new standards after the transition occurs. All right. Moving on to trainers and training sponsor organizations. I will reiterate. So the non-expired courses and any events that are already scheduled when this change happens will automatically be transitioned to the new standards. So trainers and TSOs will not need to manually revise any of their courses. They will not need to resubmit any of their courses to align to the new standards. All of that will be done on the back end using that crosswalk of competencies and standards. And again, in conjunction with that manual review that we're doing, that kind of 1 to 3 month time period after the changeover happens, all of that will be taken care of during that time. So you don't need to worry about anything with any of your existing courses or existing scheduled events. Where this does come into play for trainers and TSOs is obviously after the changeover happens, you're going to be submitting any new course into the system with the new standards. So, but again, that's going to be that November date. And there's a lot of time between now and then to familiarize yourself with those. And then the last thing too, because I know that there's been some kind of connection between developing, achieving, extending and EC 1, 2, and 3. There's no, the transition has no effect on trainer levels or TSO statuses. Those are handled through approval and those will remain untouched. Excellent question, Liz. And I'm going to kind of touch upon this in the next audience as well. So for program administrators, the staff reports will be updated. So they're going to be updated to include both the archived training information and the current training information when the switchover happens. So you won't lose any access to training information during the transition. So all of those, I mean, it's going to look maybe a little different if you're going into the individual, if you're going into the learning record level, but in terms of your staff reports and things like that, those are going to be updated to include both. So there will be no missing information. There won't be two reports at that higher level. It's only when you get down to the kind of the granular level that you're going to need to see the two. All right. And that was it for those kind of three groups. If anybody has any questions, feel free to let me know or put them in the chat.
So I wanted to jump back in real quick and just share some things that were in the chat. The Michigan AUI website, you do not have to be a member. all of the training, all of the resources, everything is free. All of the resources that are listed are free. So there is no cost involved and everyone has access to everything on the site.
And I wondered before we get to the survey piece, if there are any questions that you either want to add to the chat or want to come off mute and ask, since we do have some time available to do that. You know, there was a lot of information. I also think I'm the only one that can probably say this. And that is when we think about the launch of the core knowledge and core competencies for the early care and education field and the launch of this new body of standards, we're really looking at those supports and have really intentional support from Michigan AEYC in a way that really, I think, will help any and all individuals that are in the process of learning more and thinking about how these apply and can be implemented in the role that they have. We really, we did one little EduPaths training and really did not have a suite or we really had a lot of opportunity. So I am thrilled that we are in this position announcing and introducing these standards in this way. So big, huge thank you to Michigan AUIC and to Michelle for really embracing and thinking through and developing and just really going above and beyond to make sure that we're in really a good place with this. So Annie, I'll practice the art of pausing for a minute and just make sure there's not anything else. Hopefully you're thinking about what you started this session with in terms of what you thought would be important to know, or for someone to be able to demonstrate in their role and see a standard level area where that might be found. I know personally, I am really excited about having a standard that focuses on well-being. I feel like that's really cutting edge for us and feels like the right thing to do on so many levels. So I'm looking forward to that continuing to, become just a normal part of what we do and having it represented in our body. So it's going to put a link if the QR code is not working, but this is a survey just about the webinar, but also about, who should for sure know about this. As I said, this is our first kind of introductory webinar, and we, started with a really small group to sort of test this out, kind of see what your thoughts were, but we wanted you to start thinking and also help inform our future